think it's a completely justified process. You go back over those things and once they work.
But do any of you guys think in your workshops that if you'd have invited a provocation, invited people to be in an adversarial position in relation to what you're talking about? I mean, not in a kind of stupid sort of school debate way, but actually say, well, okay, you're talking about, we're standing in an art college talking about intervening in a situation which we don't really have a right to talk about, or we're talking about it in a kind of polite and once removed way. What are we doing? There's things. I mean, I don't know. Should we be doing that more?
I think we will both be able to have our habits. We invited architecture students and staff because that's what our workshop was about, and that really, when we looked at the images that we made and that they made, there was definitely a difference. Like ours were a lot more flat and illustrative, whereas theirs were kind of going upwards, which was expected. We did invite film students to this, but it's the last year before Christmas, so I mean, fair. And some came last night to have a little lunch and they were quite nice. But I think it is important to circulate your work and have that conversation. I think our whole course is about conversation and communication, and I think there are things that we can voice in a way that, I think we are a little bit too polite a lot of the time about what we're trying to say. I think there's nothing wrong with saying it sometimes, and having an open relationship and conversation with other departments and staff and people outside of here as well is quite important. So,
yeah, I think we're kind of seeing it like through one lens, like because we're all on the same course. Whereas, like you say, you could really tell a difference, even though they're still art students. Their like architectural approach was so different to what we produce, and maybe like going back to art, something completely different would have happened if we'd have invited, I don't know, like fashion students or something.
I think sometimes we're a bit afraid of course collaboration as well, because it's like, it looks like, when we work with Jo, she takes photos for us, and it's like, does it look like we just have her do that bit of work for us? But actually, she's very good at it, so why wouldn't we let her photograph it, It makes a lot of sense. And I think that, in terms of conversation, like if, you could speak to a stylist or, someone who works on photo, not that you don't anyway, but, yeah, I think that's important to make your work valid and also active.
Yeah, I spoke to a film shooting today, and because my project is related to a competition about post-truth politics, and I'm focusing on how politicians tell you alternative facts and hide the truth. But she showed me this Korean horror film, and she showed me all the different camera angles and stuff, and it completely changed my approach. So now this is like the tipping point to a whole new, different type of experimentation just from talking to her. So
I was emailing an artist for the last 2 weeks called Gregory, and he works a lot with just documentation, and he makes books and they're really beautiful, and he just carries a point and shoot camera everywhere with him, and that's just his practice, that's all he does. And he's based in Dublin where my white lady lives, so it kind of made sense to speak to him about it. And he was talking about how a lot of things that he documents are kind of forced into the atmosphere from gentrification and things, and how we interact with things. He did a photo series on the swing set, a handmade swing set that I used to build them when I was a kid, but you don't really see them anymore because children now have iPads and iPhones and apps, and they're not outside as much. And he was like, I feel like it's important to do that because it's important to me. It's how I grew up, and I think there's something really beautiful in that. But I never really thought of it that way until when you said it, and I was like, actually, I do that too. So sometimes it's important I think just to validate your work as well. Just know that what you're doing is okay. I think we all need that sometimes.
I think it's how quickly you can move on from the validation of an event like this, which is, it's a really strong studio show, to facing outwards and uploading these to line and then they're rejected because nobody understands what they are. You know, and we had a joke over email about, you know, the Paul McCartney set, and you know but actually there is something about the accessibility of your work to different communities. You know, whether they're sort of, you know, PhD spaces or the community with which you want to engage, and what that means to you. You know, it's that funny thing with illustration where it is you know, it's sort of portable, and it's it kind of exists away from institutions. You know, it's sort of out there in the world, in children's books and on animations, and you know, in a built environment, as well as in art schools, and so I suppose talking more about not any of the other courses, but the people that are outside this building. I mean, that's obviously more and more the case as you edge into being not here. But that's a pretty, it's an interesting thing, right?
Are there any more questions? Can you ask anything about the work, what you think, what the hell is it?
Yeah.
Well, I'd just like to sort of echo the praise and just say how much I've enjoyed listening to your presentation. It's really fascinating to see the work you've done, and everybody's done, but it's been great to hear you talk about it and to see the film as well, which is such an interesting way to explain the work, or sort of a companion piece to the work. And yeah, I mean, just sort of picking up on Peter's point, because that's what I was kind of wondering, and maybe with Lauren's work as well, or your group's work, the sort of the stuff of the state work, who is that for? Is that for?
Our next step is, because we were so kind of concerned in this unit about making a final piece, and then we actually went back to the brief and realised that it was research and documentation, so we kind of went back a step and realised we needed to be in the location more. Understand it a bit more. So me and Lauren went to the archive and got some history up about the area. The Arlington project, which was a project about regenerating the whole kind of area. And I think because we're interested in obviously creating a play space as such, it will kind of have a community feel to it. So I think our next step is to kind of even go to the council to speak to them about just ideas, and even kind of interviewing people of the area, because this kind of play space will be in the area, so it's kind of nice to have their input as well.
So is there an actual plan for the play space?
We want to make it obviously like more life size, so going on to the next unit, I think that's what we'll kind of focus on more.
How do you identify the need for a play space?
Well, because I was originally in my report looking at kind of collections, displays, arrangement, and Lauren was focused on interaction in art.
Yeah, and I was like, a lot of it was like class as well, and how, in like quite a personal level, just class and understanding of art and things like that. So then, like, it kind of worked to go together,
Yeah.
really. But yeah, I don't know.
We were talking about like post-degree and what we're going to do, but I want to obviously keep the momentum of creating work and documentation. I think we feel the same, and I've started to speak to some of my friends who study elsewhere, kind of looking at living space, because that's probably where we're going to be, maybe. But I think carrying on, you know, with my own research, writing briefs, hopefully your help, and looking at kind of like documentation through, you know, other people trying to do, like I've got friends who are completely sculptural based and friends who just paint, and I think it's very nice to, you know, hand a brief to somebody who does something different and to see how we produce two different things. I think that's the beauty of this as well, is that we all kind of, someone who does the same elective, you know, and seeing, you know, what I make and then what they make, and how we kind of got to that point is quite nice, and having that conversation in workshops is quite nice too. So yeah.
It was a little bit like what Jordan was saying, making it more accessible to people around that area. It does feel a little bit like neglected.
Yeah.
So
That's the idea of kind of staging it. Like I was talking to a friend of my parents who works for a museum back home, which no one really goes to because they haven't changed anything inside it in a very long time. I was like, well, have you thought about putting some new stuff in? And they were like, oh yeah, but people still might not come. And I think because we live in a time where we're able to publicise things and kind of have that kind of outward view of, and I think what's important with my work and kind of our group really is giving it to everybody as an audience and not making it kind of segregated as like an art thing. So what does that mean? Art is for everyone. And I think that's what we were kind of discussing with this whole collective thing, is maybe positioning exhibitions and inviting an audience that might feel a little bit segregated from that world. I think that's important, as well as children and doing workshops with kids and schools.
It lives at locations where you wouldn't normally find this kind of stuff.
And that kind of class thing as well, we're talking about that, and how like our parents are kind of like, don't really know what you're doing, but good job.
I think there's a feeling in the air around the way that Emily was making a point about the uses of a project and who is it for, and the sort of apparatus that leads to a commission or a piece of funding for a project. Who commissions it? Where does that money come from? Who knows about that and who doesn't? And what's the relationship between that and is it going to be foisted upon a group of people, or are they going to be, are they going to be consuming it, or is it, so the museum you were talking about, there's a lot of socially oriented public funding projects around at the moment where, the Assemble kind of projects, and there's a sort of post-Turner Prize, not backlash, but, critical overhaul of actually what does it mean when a group of architects go to Liverpool and then repurpose a set of terraced houses. Did that come from a community land trust, or did it come from the Arts Council? All of those things are quite complex. Well, they're very complex. But also, within the spaces of this room, you'll all have, I was thinking about you guys over there. Is Dom here still? Dom? Your neighbours, your workshop yesterday. And that idea of when you're in a subject like illustration, but you have your own area of interest within that, which is, concept art, for example. How do you engage a group of people who are sort of outside of that specialism or outside of that area of interest to bring them in and have them actually quite quickly be of value to you, or not feeling as if they're just kind of patsies in an exchange, that they're actually participating. Do you know what I mean, Dom? It was an interesting moment. But essentially, just to put it in a nutshell, there's this idea of outside in or inside out. Where does a project start from the outside in, or does it start from the inside out when there are other stakeholders? It's a sort of interesting thing to consider, whether that's a commission for the Folio Society or a social space commission for the Arts Council, or when you feel as if your area of illustration is not talked about enough or not regarded enough. Where do you start the project? Where does it ignite? What do you do? Maybe if it's okay, we just sort of dissolve and can kind of walk around and have a look. That would be good. Can I just say thank you again this morning to the three groups. Aware that not as many people are here as there ought to be. We did ask the group as a whole to support itself and to support each other, beyond their moment of glory, and that's not happened as much as we would have liked this morning. So, we could say it's always, we always feel responsible for that, but actually it's, of course, we're just individuals within a group of 86. So each one of you is equally important in that process, and I think you've really got to look to one another and be more and more autonomous as you go on and into BA3B. I could have sent out an email this morning and, you know, jigged everybody out of bed or whatever, but I didn't, you know, because I think now it infantilises all of you. Don't you agree? I don't know.
Yeah.
You don't have to agree, but so I think there's something that can yet be done, because we're beginning to see the group flexing its collective muscles. And the next bit, I think, is the way that you sort of face each other up. And I would say, even with this last afternoon, with R2, T2, and P4, right? That you are heavily involved in the participation there. But also, how is this going to not sound corny? But I, as a thought experiment, just actually to take a lap of the room and look at people's work and be conscious of whether or not you've actually ever spoken to them, and have a conversation with them today where you can see a connection to their work. There are cliques in any group, and that can be useful, but it can also be not useful at all. And I think you're good enough and you're clever enough. We're all good enough and clever enough to be aware of that and be aware of what we can do about it for creative purposes, you know? So try it. Look at people's work and have a conversation with somebody that you don't know, in order to propagate another set of things happening in BA3B, another set of collaborations that might continue beyond this place. Okay, is that fair? Yeah. Finally, we're going to have to, in amongst eating whatever we're going to eat, I'm incredibly hungry now. I don't know, Raoul creates this sort of mystery around food that makes me want to eat everything. But we're going to go and eat, but also we're going to get some drinks from Tesco's, I think, and a few bites. But we might need a couple of people to help us. Just lug it back here, okay?
I'll help.
Thank you. One more person?
Yeah, help
Thank
me.
you, Ram. Yeah. You can cook it as well. Okay, so we'll get a bite to it. We'll just, if you will agree when we meet back here, then go to Tesco and get it back, and then we've got it ready for 3:30. Okay? Thank you again. Have a good lunch.
Thank you.